Hi, it's T with Teaquilts, and we're back today to talk more about the Kaleidoscope Triangles die. So I just wanted to come back and go quickly over the dies that I have been using or that you can use with this system, because I'm going to show you some things that you can make with this die, and then I want to make sure that you have all the die numbers. Also, I am an Accuquilt affiliate, and so I will leave my affiliate link down below. For some reason, YouTube will not let me use brackets when I need to give you specific products, so I'm just going to go over the product numbers and just give you a link to the Accuquilt site. So I would appreciate if you use my links. It doesn't cost you any more, but I get credit for the referral since I'm telling you about this information in my videos. So the main die that we're discussing here is the Triangle's Kaleidoscope die, and it is a studio only die, and it is 50229. So if you have an Accuquilt Go system, this die will not work in that system. So just be aware of that, because it's very important that you don't buy a die that you cannot use in your system. When I bought this die, Accuquilt lists on their website that you should also buy the Triangle Isosceles die, number 50222. I have been playing around with this, and I'm going to show you later on some cut pieces, and I haven't found a lot of ways that you can use this particular shape with this shape, because they do not match up in the sense of how I think that it should match up. Also, on my own, I have found out that you can use 3-inch finished squares, 3-inch finished half square triangles, and also 3-inch finished quarter square triangles. And so I'm going to go over those numbers with you as well. So I'm just going to pull these out. They're not in any particular order. So I can't get the dies to focus on the text because it's so small. But this is Triangle Isosceles, 5-inch wide by 6-inch wide. And the number is 50222. And you actually get to cut 3 of these. So I tend to just cut a 6.5-inch strip, and then I run this through my cutter that way. And also, isosceles triangles are not equilateral triangles. They do not have equal sides. So you can see where the sides of the triangle are longer than the base of the triangle. Next one here, which I have not even mentioned, in the block that I found online that I figured I could cut with the die cutting system, it needs some corner half square triangles, and I found that 4-inch finish was the closest that I could get to that size. So I am also going to be showing you a block with that, and it is 50005. So next up is our 3.5-inch squares that finish at 3 inches. I like to buy the multiples dies because I can get more cuts out of them. And this number is 50206. 50206. Next block is 3-inch finished, 3.5-inch unfinished half square triangles in multiples as well. And I have the number on this is 50163. So 50163. And then the last die here, I have one more I want to show you. I did not have the quarter square triangles in the studio size, and so I bought it on the, I have it on the go. I had got this inside of a Go Baby, so I didn't have to buy it. So this is 55704. And you can cut 4 quarter square triangles that finish at 3 inches. And one block that I'm not able to use right now until I make some other modifications is that I did pull out the Go Morning Star block on board that finishes at 12 inches. That number is 55556. 55556. Okay, and I used this A shape, and I'm going to show you what happened with this and whether I recommend you use it or how you can adjust. But we're gonna go ahead and now skip to some fabric. All right, so I have already uploaded a video called Star of the East. I am going to be using that block to show you different ways that you can modify that particular block. So that's going to be the main thing that I want to show you. And then I want to show you a block that I have some difficulty with getting things to match up. And then I want to show you a block that I found online, and I think it's called Freewheeling. Freewheeling, like as in wheeling with a car. Wheeling. And so I want to also show you how I cut for the freewheeling, because this time I do want this right here on the straight of grain. When I cut my other pieces, since they weren't on the outside, I actually lined my pieces up like this. I fan folded my fabric back and forth, and I was able to get 12 of these out of one strip set. But for this one, I do want to line up pieces this way, and then you fan fold back like so, because I want to make sure that these edges are on the straight of grain. Now the block that I made as a test block, and I even had 4 pieces left over, so 4 of the 8 pieces that I need are on the bias, and 4 of them are going to be on straight of grain, and that's just how it's going to be because I'm just doing demo blocks here. But I just wanted to inform you that you're going to cut different. Other than that, I am not going to show you any cutting, just because I think that we all know how to use our die cutting systems. And if you're not familiar with how to cut, you can go back and look at the Star of the East video, which I'll link up at the eye above. I think you have to click the little 3 dots now, and then you can find information from Teaquilts. So I will be doing that for you. All right. So one thing that I did when I first got this die, and I just never sewed those pieces together, I don't even know what I did with those pieces, is that I just cut pieces from the dies. So I went and cut some quarter square triangles, some pieces of the Kaleidoscope, some pieces of 3-inch finished squares. I even cut a few pieces of the Morning Glory die because I wanted to see if I could use it in any kind of way. Also cut 3-inch finished half square triangles. I cut Triangle Isosceles. And then I also cut some 4-inch finished half square triangles. And this is for the freewheeling block that I was talking about below. And then after that, you just need to sit down and play and figure out if any of this stuff will work. So let me put up my design board and I'll be right back. First, we're going to talk about shapes, and we're going to talk about what things match up and what things I found I was having difficulty with. I found that you could put these two together, which I used in my Star of the East, and then you can use half square triangles or quarter square triangles, depending on what it is that you're wanting to do with the particular shape. So if I just want to put corners on here, you can see where this 3.5-inch finished half square triangle is not going to work. So then I tried the quarter square triangle and put the straight of grain out here, and that worked up just fine. So you can put the straight of grain, and that's what I did in the Star of the East block. And I just put a different color on each side just to have some contrast, but you don't have to. What I found is that they tell you that this die goes with the isosceles triangle. And I just find it amazing that when I stitch this unit together here, that it doesn't equal to the same size anywhere. Now I guess I could fill in with something here, but then it's like, what shape do I fill in here with that would make this come back and be a square? Or, because I feel like it should be something that comes out and make it back into a square. So it's difficult to determine what goes where with this die. I even tried to put this in the middle and see if I could put one on each side. And then I guess that you could do that as well. And then if you have one coming out this way, I don't know if it will make a square or not, but we can just lay this out and see. So it's not really angled, and I'm not sure how many of those I would need if I need to do 4. But see, I'm looking for a straight line here that lets me know that I can do something with a quadrant. And I just don't see how this block can do all of that. And so I am really confused as to how the isosceles triangle works with this other than in the freewheeling block, which I'll show you at the end. And I'll also do a demo on how I sewed it as well. So I guess what I'm saying is that you need to play with these pieces a lot in order to get them to do anything. So I just cut pieces and I just start playing with them. So I'm going to put this piece back, because what I ended up doing is using my Morning Star. I sewed this piece onto here. And when I sewed it on, it was a little bit bigger for my 1/4 inch seam when I sewed both of these pieces on. So what I did was I used a ruler, and I just put my ruler 1/4 inch away from the end point, and then I trimmed the excess fabric off the bottom, and it was about 1/4 inch. Okay, so then when I did that and put this on top to sew this, it doesn't line up. So I need to add, this template needs to be modified to at least add a 1/2 inch to it if you want to do it this way. So I would almost recommend cutting this triangle out of, I would recommend just cutting this triangle out of some kind of paper or cardstock, and then adding a 1/2 inch to the bottom. And then that also means that whatever you're using for your edges will need to be measured out. And I don't even know if 3 inches will work on that. So let's see if a 3 inch, yeah, so you can use a 3 inch finished half square triangle, and it looks like it's just a tad big, but not much, about 1/8 inch too big. So you could use that, but once you add on to it, then this size is not going to work anymore in your corners. Let's see if this will work over here right now. So no, you can see what I'm talking about when I put this down here, and then I've still got a little space left over. So if I'm trying to put this in the corner on this particular block, then I would need to cut something much larger. So I'm just going to put this block on the board just so you can see what it would look like if you want to go through all the changes that you will need to go through to actually make this block. Okay, and then that's where I had put these Morning Glory pieces into the middles here. And again, these made it so that my edge of my pieces extended past. But if you want, you can leave it like that. You just need to add a bigger piece onto here. But I like to have my 1/4 inch seams being noticeable. So I just cut all of that off. So this would be the block, and then what you're actually going to do is add your plain piece of fabric for your corners to make a square block onto these units. It's not going to be added onto your plain units. It's just how I have it sitting on the board here. So that's one thing that you could do. So I'm going to clear this board, and then we're going to come back with the actual Star of the East block that I made, and I'm just going to show you how you can make some modifications to that particular block as well. Okay. So I'm back with the Star of the East block that actually started this whole process for this go round. And I wanted to just have you use your imagination, because I wasn't going to cut all of these pieces that I didn't really want to sew together. So we're just going to assume that all of the fabrics that I'm using, that I'm going to add to this particular block, that they're going to be the same fabric, this purple. Although they are not. I'm going to put the other fabrics on the wrong side, but I just want to do this for demo purposes. Just on this Star of the East block alone, you could have just made all of your background pieces one fabric. And you could have just put a full 3.5 inch half square triangle here. That also means that you're going to have bias edges out here, and pressing and ironing, that's two different things. And so you really need to make sure that you're pressed when you're putting out bias edges on the outsides of your block. But they will fit into this block perfectly. And we're going to assume again that this is all going to be one fabric for the pieces that I'm going to lay on this particular board. Now please note that when you put in a triangle for these quarters that I have, you now have a block that requires set-in seams. So just keep that in mind. And again, you're going to have this corner area that you can just use one fabric for, which would be your 3.5 inch cut square for 3 inch finish. And that would also mean that you're doing set-in seams on your block. So let me put these in all 4 corners. So right there, you can already see a change. And again, we're just imagining that all of this is one fabric only. Now, another little trick that you can do if you're just doing a 2 fabric, because right now we have a 3 fabric quilt, is that you can take your background fabric and also add it, and it will change the shape. And now your light spot, if this is all one fabric, it will be kicking back, changing the look of this particular block design. And so I am just going to put all of these. I'm putting this fabric on the wrong side because I want you to imagine that all of this is the same piece of fabric. And I guess I don't have another one in the blue, but I'll just put one up in a different fabric. Sorry about that. But you can now see that if this fabric here, your dominant part would just be half of the kaleidoscope, and then you would have all of this other stuff kicking out. And you could even have this kick out and this triangle be the same, and then you could do something different with your corners as well. But I just want you to know that fabric placement is very critical here on this particular block and how you want something to actually look. So we're going to take all of this off. And we're now going to talk about the isosceles triangle. So again, we've already talked about how it does not line up, but I did find a photo of a quilt block that was called Freewheeling. And I know that there's a pattern out there that you could buy, but I was just looking for stuff that I could actually cut with my die cutting system. I wasn't looking for a pattern that was going to give me templates or tell me how to cut. So for this instance, I actually used my Triangle Isosceles die, and just this part here without the added on flaps. And I know I'm not going to be able to fold this so that you can see it, but just with your Triangle Isosceles die, if we're just looking at this square area here, that is your basic kaleidoscope block. If I'm not mistaken, you can just buy this part as a block on board, or you can buy Triangle Isosceles and just add your corners, your half square triangles onto the corners. But this pattern added another layer, or the photo that I saw added another layer, that it added this piece here to each side. So from here up, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and this still happens to be the half square triangle. So what I did when I first started to make this block is I actually started by taking my pieces and just sewing on the half square triangle. So I took all 8 of my pieces and just sewed those all together. And once I got those all sewed together, then I sewed them into pairs. So once I sewed this block together, it had these, it stopped with the purple and this blue. Those were the 2 shapes that were not on the quilt block. And so I had these inset edges here that I had to go in and inset these kaleidoscope shapes. Now also, when I sewed these together, I also stopped stitching at a 1/4 inch from the edge so that it would make it easier for me to do the inset seam. So I'll show you that in a block when I have another block cut out, and I will show you how I'm going to do that. But so this block here, there's no other way you can do this with the other than with the Accuquilt dies, unless you're going to sew these set-in seams for these kaleidoscope triangles. Now, I also found that the 3-inch finished half square triangle was not going to work on this edge here. So I had to end up using my 4-inch finished half square triangle die. And I do have just a little bit extra that I could trim off in certain places. I just made sure that I centered my half square triangle to the center of my kaleidoscope when I sewed my corners on. So it's an advanced block, I would say, because of the set-in seams, but I really like it. And like I said, there is a quilt pattern out called Freewheeling, and if I can find the pattern, I haven't seen the pattern yet. I just saw a block, and I saw a reference to it on the Accuquilt site in the comment section. So I will try to leave you the pattern information as well if you're interested in purchasing the pattern. And then the final thing that I saw that you can do with this, I found another photo online that uses this shape, and this whole entire quilt here is just made with this shape. And then I don't know how they got it to the background, if they appliqued it to the background or if they found some setting triangle to put it into here, because I know that everything that I have, it does not work for setting in here. But I have not done this technique, but I just thought that I would share it with you anyway. So that's going to be it for things like what can you do with this. And so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can add to this video how to piece the Freewheeling block since I have it. And hopefully this video won't be too long, but I wanted to go over first the different things that you can do and just kind of encourage people to play with the dies, because even though it's kind of frustrating, I did find a way to manipulate how to finish my other block that is not in the correct size, but I know what to do to make it so that it will fit. And hopefully, if I get a chance, I'll also add a photo of that at the end. So let's get sewing. So I just wanted to give you one more look at the block that we're about to make, the Freewheeling block. And I just want to go over what it is that you're going to need to cut. So you're going to need from 2 different fabrics. You're going to need 4 of each fabric of the Triangle Isosceles. So for a total of 8, that's going to be your center. You're going to need 8 3 1/2 inch half square triangles that are cut 3 1/2 inch, that finish is at 3 inch. So those are going to go all the way around. They're actually going onto the ends of each of your Triangle Isosceles. You're also going to need 8 of your Kaleidoscope triangles in the long cut to go around the block. And then you're also going to need 4 half square triangles that finish at 4 inches. They're cut 4 1/2 for the corners of the block. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with sewing, and then I'll be right back. So the first thing that we're going to do for this block is that we are going to sew these half square triangles onto the bottom base of our Triangle Isosceles. Okay, so we're going to do that for all 8 of these, and then when I'm done, I will come back. I'm just coming back to say that because these half square triangles are a little bit bigger than what's needed, I would fold in the center, match up the centers. I forgot to do that, and then make sure that they're all centered across the base of your triangles. So I'm going to do that for the remaining triangles, and then I'll be back when they're all done. My pieces laid on the board here, and now my next step is to sew these into pairs. And what I'm going to do is, when I sew these into pairs, I am going to make sure that I line up the seam in here, and I'm just going to put a pin on the back side of the seam. And the reason why I'm putting a pin on the back side of the seam is because I'm going to stop as soon as I get to the seam line, because I want to stop that 1/4 inch from the edge. So if I got my seam allowance pressed open, then that means that my 1/4 inch seam allowance stops right in this seam line here. So I'm going to stitch down from the top to the bottom, and then I'm going to stop stitching. I'm going to back stitch, as a matter of fact, when I get to that point. So let me tilt you down. So 1/4 inch all the way down till I get to the seam line, and then I'm going to back stitch. And what that does is it gives me that space I need so that I can do the set-in seam. So when I open this block up, you can see that this top part does not have any stitching in there. Okay, this end piece right here is just loose. It's not completely sewn down. So I'm going to repeat that 4 more times. Well, I'm going to repeat that 3 more times. I needed a total of 4 times so that I can get my block lined up. And I do want to make sure that I line up my seam allowance so that when I press it, it's as good as it can get. Everything is not going to be perfect, especially when your pieces are not fitting together perfectly. That's one of my I guess one of my pet peeves with this is that I can't do certain things that they're telling you to buy a block for or die for, and then they don't have anything to help you with that. So let's go ahead and stitch this one. So that's 2. And we have this one ready. Just like before, I'm now going to go ahead and press these seams open. Even though I'm going to be moving them around, I find that if I press them open before they get attached to larger pieces, that it's easier to do. So I'm going to go ahead and press all of these seams open, and I'll be right back. So we can sew like 2 of these quarters into half of the block and do that twice, and then we could sew the block. What I like to do, however, because it's just less bulkiness for me to be working with, is that I like to go ahead at this point and add in my kaleidoscopes on this edge here, because it's not going to interfere with me piecing the next piece on the actual sides. So in order to do that, remember we've got that space that we left open in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stitch where I am going to put my kaleidoscope piece on the bottom, and I'm just putting a pin to hold it, and I'm not really worried about the kaleidoscope piece underneath. I'm going to pull this seam back, so I'm just pulling it all back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop stitching when it hits this seam line. If I stitch from this side, I can't see where the seam line is. But if I stitch from the sides of the pieces that are already attached, you will see where your stitching is, and I'm going to stop right when I get to that stitching. So let's do that. And I don't have to back stitch here because it's not going to come loose there. So again, I'm just doing my 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to get up to the stitch line, and then I'm going to back stitch. So this is what it looks like from the front. And then when I turn it to the back, you can see where I have stopped stitching here from this corner in about 1/4 inch. So I don't know if the camera is going to pick all of that up because of the thread color. Now what I do is I rotate this around, and now that I have this point here where the stitching is, I can now stitch from the front. From the back, I'm going to pull all of these seam allowances down so that they don't get caught as I'm stitching. And I'm just going to stitch until I get to that stitching line. So let me show you this from the wrong side first. So right here, if I move this, you can see where I have like a space where I could have done one more stitch, but I'd rather be short a stitch than to go over and hit into the next stitch, because that's where the pucker comes into your corner. Now your block looks kind of strange like this. All you need to do, I use this wooden press stick, and I do sell these on my website. I have a couple more in stock. They come in sets with matching awls. And I just press this down with that, and it just lays it nice and flat. So on this one, my seam is now being pressed towards my long cut kaleidoscope piece, and I'm going to press that with a block with the I'm also going to press that with an iron. And again, we're pressing and not really ironing. I'm actually picking up my iron when I'm doing this. And now my unit is nice and flat. So I'm going to repeat this 3 more times to do that. I'm also going to have to change my battery out on my camera. So I'll be right back. All right, I have my pieces on my design board here, and I have all 4 of my units completed, and then I have the seams pressed towards the kaleidoscope. Now these 4 pieces, from what I'm gathering, these are the ones that have the bias edge on the outside, and the ones that I have here do not have the bias edge. So at some point I'm going to put a pin in these 4 so that I know that I want to add the half square triangles onto those sides. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and continue on. I don't need the pins right now, because what I'm now going to do is go ahead and sew these into pairs. So I have my pieces sewn together and I have them pressed. And we now have another gap here that we can fill with. What I'm going to do is just put some pins in these that I know are the bias edges. Gonna do that to all 4 of these pieces because I don't want to lose track of which one is which, and I don't want to be pulling on them later. If you had cut this on the straight of grain like I showed you before I started sewing at the beginning of this video, then you know you don't have to worry about this. But it's because I had cut these pieces earlier, had them extra left over from my previous quilt top that I made. So what I'm going to do, I just like filling in things and sewing them when they're in smaller sections as compared to having a big block and then having to deal with the whole big block as I'm setting in seams. So the less material that I work with at a time, that's how I like to work. If you want to stitch your whole block together and then put your pieces on, that's absolutely fine as well. So I'm going to stitch this one. And I want to make sure I'm on the edge here. Pull my seam back. My seam allowance is back so I can see when I get up on that seam line. And then I'm going to back stitch. Cut that. And then pull this around and do the exact same thing. Always, now I'm stitching with the triangle on top when I add these pieces on. It's just how it, you know, when you do that second seam, that's just how it goes. All of my seams are pulled back. Everything underneath is facing me. And then I'm going to stitch up to that 1/4 inch seam. Back stitch. And cut my thread. And again, we're going to press this. I used to use my fingernails all the time, and my fingernails are so weak now from pressing all of the seams over the years. So I'm going to press that with the iron. And now it's laying nice and flat. This is what we currently have. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other piece, and I'll be back. Okay. I'm back, and I have my pieces that are in halves now ready to be sewn together. Just a quick reminder to line up your seams here and also in the center and then also down here on the bottom. And then once I'm lining that up, I also want to make sure that when I get to the stitching part, that I am stitching 1/4 inch, leaving that 1/4 inch seam allowance open, which means that I'm putting that pin on the seam, on the bottom part of the seam, and I'm going to stop right before I get to that line where my 2 pieces of fabric meet up. Just don't forget that. It's important. And then I also want to line up my center. And put a pin in it as well. So stitch 1 more 1/4 inch seam here. So I'm back and I have my block now, and we have our final 2 sections that we need to fill in. And I am going to do that. It's the same exact technique, so I'm not going to bore you with sitting here showing you how to do it one more time. So I'll be back. So we're getting close to the finish line now. We have our block pretty much done, except that we need to, if you want an octagon, you can keep an octagon, but if you want to add corners, now is the time to add the corners. So what I like to do is take one of them, and I like to just fold this in half to make sure that I'm going to be putting this half square triangle in the middle, and I just go ahead and give it a press.
To schedule your free in-home consultation.
And so now I want to fold my half square triangle in half,
that ignite your mood. True fragrance.
and also make sure that it matches up at that juncture, and then I can go ahead and put a pin in that to hold it. And I will do that all the way around. But for your sake, and so I can cut to the next part, I'm going to go ahead and just sew this one for you. But just again, we're just sewing 1/4 inch seams. And then at this point, I'm just going to press this seam down. I am not going to press it open because of the bulk. So we're just going to go ahead and just press that down.
Powerful results validated by dermatologists.
And your block will look like that. And so I'm going to do that to my other 3 corners. And when I'm done, I'll come back. So here are my 2 blocks that I've sewn. I put my corners on opposite sides. I just want you all to know that, but I did that because I was trying to avoid having, on the second block, which I made over here, avoid having the bias edges out, like you can kind of see up here where the bias edge kind of dips in a little bit. So, and that's because it had just a little bit of stretching while I was pulling the fabric to sew it into that set-in seam. So I am going to go ahead and finish my other block, and then I'll just come back and show you a photo of it, because I'm going to be doing adding some fabric to the bottom of those triangles where they're too short, and I don't want to do that on film because I'm not advocating for that. I'm trying to make blocks that are die cut only, but this time I just don't want to waste my fabric that I've already cut, so I'm going to go ahead and sew it. So I'm back with my test block that I was trying to cut with just the isosceles triangles, and needed all of these other smaller isosceles triangles to make it work. I did use my shortened isosceles triangles as a design element, a time to be creative, and so I put a different color strip instead of adding the same piece of fabric and making it bigger. I decided to go ahead and make it look like it was a frame block, and I really do like that as well. So this is also another option. And the reason why I left the half square triangles on is because I wanted to remind you that I told you that the 3-inch finished half square triangles were too little to finish off this block. I think it would work with a 3.5-inch finished half square triangle, but I didn't have that size, so I opted to just go ahead and put the 4-inch finished half square triangle on, and then I'm just going to square this block up. But that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Share my channel with your other quilting friends, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye, Teaquilters. Stay blessed.